welcome to The Skinny for Friday, November 28th. I'm Mitch Perry, the senior political reporter for the Florida Phoenix, joined today by my radio partner, creative loafing editor-in-chief Ray Roa. Hey, Ray.
Happy Thanksgiving, Mitch. How you feeling?
Feeling good. America calls this Black Friday, which I don't like to use that term, though. It seems it's all about commerce. Mm-hmm.
I once fought somebody at a radio, or got I had trauma from a Radio Shack as a teenager. I dragged my dad out there because I just wanted a stereo. It was awful.
Well, it's so different now, right, with online shopping and the like. But I will say that, Kathy Castor, she had she has her annual press event earlier this week promoting Small Business Saturday, mm-hmm. right, which is tomorrow, which is great, promoting independent businesses. So whatever. Anyway, great post-Thanksgiving Day to all you, Friday. Good for many of you have it off. We did say last week, I think, with the show that we were going to be a little lighter in the news, but you know what?
Just can't resist.
I know, exactly. We've got 55 minutes. We want to take the most of your time, our time, to make the most of it. So later in the show, we've got a couple, I think, really interesting topics to talk about, state education news, and also a grocery co-op situation, or something that they're trying to get going in St. Petersburg, South St. Pete, to be exact. And we're going to have some folks from that organization on later in the hour. I think it's going to be very interesting. I'm looking forward to talking to those folks here. But I want to say a couple things because, most people probably aren't paying too much attention to the news. There's not a lot. Well, there's a news tragedy, of course, in D.C. a couple days ago, and that's probably leading everything if you turn on cable news. But some news here around the state that I think that maybe people didn't see, Ray. One of them was, so we remember back in early September, Joe Latipo, it was actually in Valrico, DeSantis and Surgeon General Joe Latipo were here to say they wanted to eliminate vaccine mandates in schools. And that was a shocking announcement. And a couple of things have to happen for that to happen. One is, I think there's 11 vaccines they're referring to specifically. 7 of them you have to change through the legislature. And news alert, now I know there's 6 weeks to go before the session begins, but there hasn't been one bill filed to do what DeSantis and Latipo want to do because, hey, they look at the polls, okay? And public has said they don't want this in Florida. But you can also change some of these vaccine mandates through rulemaking, as they call it. And on Wednesday afternoon, here it is right before the 4-day holiday weekend, they kind of slip it in there. The state announced they're going to have a 3-hour public meeting in Panama City Beach, of all places, for the public to weigh in on existing rules regarding vaccine requirements for public and private schools from preschool through grade 12, as well as adult education. So probably, obviously, most people aren't going to be able to get up there for that, but that is going to take place. So the governor is intent on changing some of these, the ones that they can do by themselves through rulemaking, as they say. So that's something we're going to watch because I see when the legislature, I'm not sure the legislature is with DeSantis on that at all. Okay, another story I want to mention is this Palestinian-American teenager who spent 9 months in Israeli detention without being charged has been freed. That's Muhammad Ibrahim, who I believe is now 16 years old. He was 15 when he was arrested in February in the West Bank, where he was visiting on a holiday from Florida for allegedly throwing stones at Jewish settlers. He is from Palm Bay and Brevard County. He was taken into custody by the Israeli military in February. And, of course, his 20-year-old cousin was Saifullah Musalat, who was beaten to death by settlers in the West Bank earlier this year. Saifullah Musalat was from Tampa. And actually, Muhammad Ibrahim also worked in the same ice cream shop. And what's interesting about that, Ray, is in terms of, the Israelis finally releasing him, I guess yesterday, that's when it was announced, maybe it was earlier this week, is, we had the ceasefire, of course, end of the last month or so between Israel and Hamas. Great thing that finally happened. And there was Hamas released all the remaining hostages, and the bodies of those that were dead. But also there was an exchange, and there always is with these kind of things. And Israel released a lot of prisoners, and some of them had done some bad things, and yet they had kept this kid in there who was accused, again, worse, and he denied it, of throwing stones. So anyway, he is out. I think it's a pretty significant story. That was just announced yesterday. Okay, so let's talk about, we had on Laura Hine a few months ago, Ray, from the Pinellas County School Board chair, and she was really passionate talking about how upsetting it is that the state has now basically allowed anybody to get a school voucher, right? And this is how this is really kind of harming public schools. So 2 years ago, the legislature passed what was called landmark legislation. Depending on your perspective, is either a godsend or maybe another move to further bleed public education when they passed HB1, which expanded access to school vouchers and opened the floodgates for any child in Florida to use public money for private schooling. So how's that working? Well, right now, joining us right now to talk about that is Jay Wagmeister. He covers education for the Florida Phoenix, which of course is the publication that I work for. Jay joining us via Zoom from Tallahassee. Good morning, Jay.
Hey, good morning, guys, from Tallahassee. Thanks for having me on.
Great to have you on, Jay. So I think the news about this, there was an independent audit that came out, maybe not that recently, but I know it was discussed in the legislature that kind of really discussed what's going on now that we've had these, vouchers for a couple of years. Can you kind of give us the highlights?
Yeah, for sure. So, as you mentioned, the last couple of years, the school choice program has kind of been booming, growing pretty rapidly. And there's been discussion about, as you mentioned, public schools and how that's going to interact with the funding. And so this audit came out, independent audit from the state, that really spelled it out. They called it at the top of the audit, said the program had a myriad of accountability problems, and it said the funding did not follow the child, which is kind of using the own language of the proponents of school choice who said, state funding should follow the child instead of going straight to the school. And this audit came out and said the contrary, that the way that the accountability measures have been handling this program, it found that funding did not follow the child. And so this audit was dropped on both the budget committees in the House and the Senate. And a couple people that have been following education longer than I have said that it was one of the more exciting education meetings in years at the Capitol. Senator Jason Pizzo, an independent but was a Democrat when the school voucher program really expanded, called it an I told you so. And Senator Jennifer Bradley, a Republican, echoed similar thoughts.
Yeah, and Jay, I think it was at a House committee meeting that revealed that there's a $47 million hole in the Department of Education's budget, and it's let some public and private schools complain that they aren't getting properly paid.
Yeah, so taking a look at some of the numbers on this, it resulted in $47 million budget shortfall for the Department of Education for the previous school year. And that was even after they tapped into the Education Stabilization Fund, which is tied into, it's legislatively authorized to account for the fluctuation that school choice is going to bring. And Senator Don Gates, who's kind of leading the charge on the legislative end on this, said during the meeting that at any given point, the state doesn't know where 30,000 students are at, which, whether they're in public school, private school, or recognized as being in both, representing $270 million in money. And last month in the House, they discussed that before the school year started, the state had distributed to scholarship funding organizations, which are kind of the middleman in this distributing the school choice funds. They distributed $655 million to the scholarship funding organization before the school year started. And then they later learned that at least $7 million of that was sent to families to pay for children, even though the state wasn't entirely sure if that child that was receiving the money was in private or public school.
Yeah. Again, if you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Jay Wagmeister from the Florida Phoenix, talking about this audit that came out about the school voucher program and how kind of out of control it is. This is what, again, some public school folks that we've had on the program here have talked about anecdotally.
Yeah, Board Member Hines was very adamant about saying, where is this money going? Who's able to take advantage of it?
And Jay, you were here, right, 2 years ago, right? Were you 23 when Paul Renner, who sponsored the bill, it was introduced? Were you here?
I was not here. No.
Okay.
Jay, let me ask you, how much light did the audit shed on where does the buck stop on this? Who is to blame for this? I know Gates said he's going to file some bills here to try and get this back on track, but why are these failures happening?
Well, interestingly enough, in the Senate Budget Committee, they made a point to say that we're not going to use this meeting as a blame game. but nonetheless, I mean, they're kind of looking at administrative rules and how like the application deadlines play into all this, and how statute spells out when the money has to be transferred. It's talking about maybe not the clearest transfer of data between the state and these scholarship funding organizations. Senator Pizzo, made a reference in the committee to the Department of Education saying, like, what do you need? Do you need, law enforcement officers to track down this money? Like, what do you need?
Wow. Was he being facetious or was he serious there?
he made a reference to being from Jersey. He said, I'm from Jersey. When someone owes you money, you find them. Jeez. Anyway, it seems like there's quite a bit going on between administrative rules, statutory. Senator Danny Burgess, who's the chair of the Senate Education Budget Subcommittee, said that it's a cautionary tale as far as, getting something prepared to launch and then launching it in time and kind of making sure that you're doing that in the right order.
Well, there's certainly critics who said, I mentioned, Jay, a moment ago, if you were up there, because I wasn't following the bill closely when I was up in Tallahassee 2 years ago, because one of our other staffers was doing that. But nevertheless, we heard a lot of this criticism when it was, in the making. It's like, you can say what you want about the voucher program, which, of course, Florida was one of the leaders of that going back to the Jeb Bush era 20-something years ago. But this has been, on steroids, essentially. And by the way, Paul Renner, who was, one of the people who takes pride in this, and he's maybe running on this, he's running for governor now, the former Speaker of the House. I asked him, he was in Tampa 2 weeks ago at a press conference, and I asked him, I said, Speaker, what do you make of this? It doesn't sound so great. And I'm going to quote from my story I wrote. He says, quote, I think you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is a great program, but if out of that 500,000 there are 50 or 500 that are not complying in the right way, kick them off the program. Yeah, I mean, it says 500,000 because I think there's 500,000 roughly who are taking advantage of this program. So that's enforcement. Don't use any problems along the way to eliminate the program or redo the program. Well, I don't think anybody's talking about that. Democrats would maybe like to see that happen. The FEA maybe would like to see that happen. That's not going to happen. But you mentioned Senator Gates, Papa Gates. I believe he has filed legislation that try to address this. Do you have any details on that?
Yeah, so you're right, Mitch. 500,000 students taking advantage of the program, which is equal to about $4 billion. I think before the program went universal, I think it was maybe a couple $100 million. So, I mean, in the last 5 years, it's really, really grown. Senator Gates has introduced SB 318 last week, which I guess the main component of it is that it would separate the mechanism of how school choice scholarships are funded. So the education budget, how public schools get their money and private kids get their money now is through the FEFP, the Florida Education Finance Program. It's kind of the formula. And the Senate has, in their plan, they would separate school choice vouchers into a separate categorical, separate from the FEFP. And they are also looking at increasing the stabilization fund that I mentioned earlier to help kind of offset the fluctuation in enrollment. Is also talking about clearing up those deadlines and maybe being a little bit more strict on application and acceptance deadlines that I mentioned earlier that were a little bit maybe cloudy.
Right.
And then also rounding it out, he's talking about assigning Florida identification numbers for each student. Right. So public school students already have these numbers, and I believe some private students also do, but not all of them. And so the House has really uncovered that it's causing a problem in tracking students because it's the easiest way to verify a student. Otherwise, if you're just going off names, you might have repeat names or similar names or typos or, these numbers help provide clarity. And so the House is really looking at that. But I will say the House, although they haven't released a proposal, does not seem to be entirely on board with Senator Gates' proposal.
Hey, Jay, the word fraud isn't in your main initial story about the audit, but you had a follow-up story a few days after that. The headline is the judge private school accepted state vouchers for students 130 miles away. In that audit, the Department of Education was found to have paid $655 million to middleman scholarship funding organizations as the statutes prescribe. How much were the legislators talking about fraud in this initial reaction to the audit, and how widespread might that be? Are we worried about that at all in the voucher program?
Well, I think the problem is, as I mentioned, is enforcement, and I know that Senator Gates's bill does include more mechanisms for them to investigate fraud and pass on fraud. Because, as you mentioned, that school that I wrote about in Brooksville and Lake City, that was kind of an instance where, they were able to investigate that one. But how many instances are there where they maybe don't have the power to investigate all of them, or it's not clear to investigate, or maybe it's, legal gray areas. If the statute's not clear enough, maybe, they did something that the general public might not maybe see as okay in transferring funds. But like if statute doesn't prohibit it, then that creates another problem.
Again, if you're just tuning in right now, it's 11:22 here in WMNF Studios. The Skinny here, 88.5 FM. Mitch Perry with Ray Roa. We're speaking with Jay Wagmeister. He's a colleague of mine at the Florida Phoenix. He covers education. We're talking about this issue about the voucher program and the accountability or lack thereof with it, and a couple other issues I want to have to speak with you, Jay, before we let you go. Let's talk about the hiring of college presidents in Florida universities, because this has been an issue for, I guess, a few years now, and seemingly these former Republicans who, I didn't know they were so much into education, who are leading some of our bigger institutions in college, in the state of Florida here. We, of course, had that whole Ben Sass debacle at University of Florida, and then the Santa Ono situation at the University of Florida. But now we've got Manny Diaz Jr., the former Miami-Dade Senate Republican and Education Commissioner under Governor DeSantis, who is now the sole finalist to become the next University of West Florida president. I want to read, so John Hill of the Tampa Bay Times has a column out that came out the last couple of days, and I'm just going to read an excerpt from what John Hill writes about this Manny Diaz, where he's at right now in the selection process. He says the search for a permanent president with a compensation package in the $1 million range reportedly drew 84 candidates. Nobody knows for sure thanks to Florida's secrecy laws. But Zach Smith, who chaired the university search committee, said after reviewing all the applicants, it became clear that Diaz's experience in education and politics, quote, uniquely prepared him to be UFW's next president. But John Hill writes, I wish Diaz the best, but for the university's sake, but really, why bother appointing a search committee, hiring headhunters, interviewing applicants, and going through the farce of conducting meetings and a national search if you're just going to throw these plum jobs to the inside guy? Talk to us about this, Jay.
Yeah, so looking at, Diaz taking the interim role, I mean, he took the interim role this summer, and the job he stepped away from was being the education commissioner for the state. And so, is that a job that he was going to step away from just to be the interim president? You kind of, it kind of seemed from the beginning that he was interested in taking the permanent role, particularly because it followed not long after former Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez stepped away from that role to become the interim president at FIU. And so it seemed like, there was a decent chance that she would end up being the permanent president there as well, in stepping away from, second in command to become an interim president maybe isn't as appealing as a potential promise of becoming the permanent president.
We had, like I said, so Ben Sass, he was the sole finalist for the president at University of Florida, and then that ended disastrously. And then this past year, Santa Ono, who was at University of Michigan, he was tapped to be the sole finalist before they learned that he supported DEI programs, and that means he couldn't be around. And then we also had FIU and at Florida A&M. They have new presidents with backgrounds in state politics, and even USF. Now, I know everybody likes the new guy at USF, Moez Lamayam, I believe that's how you pronounce it. Yeah.
Don't forget FAU either, with former Republican leader Adam Hasner as well.
That's right. Adam Hasner, very conservative from South Florida. So he's there now, guys. So we have all these. And again, it's like, is it really a fair, I guess some people are asking, is it a fair process? It seems like these very well-known folks who used to be in the legislature are getting, they opened the job up. In the case of at UWF, they had 84 applicants, but now they have one sole, a finalist. So because I guess they can't pick that, they have to go through a process here. But I don't know. It just seems a little fishy here, I guess, is what people are saying.
Well, House leaders are asking the same question. Last session, House leaders asked the same question you just asked: is it fair? And we also forgot to mention Richard Corcoran.
Oh, how could we forget that?
Kind of kicked the whole thing off at New College, and yeah. So the spirit of the law is meant to be in secrecy to have people feel free to apply, and then at the end, the search committee makes public a short list of finalists that the Board of Trustees can then interview and talk to. So that did happen at FAMU, that did happen at FAU. They publicly interviewed candidates, and then ultimately chose their president. But in the instance of University of Florida with Santa Ono, UWF with Manny Diaz, FIU with Jeanette Nunez, USF with Moez Lemayem, they're taking sole finalists. And the law says for a short list, and it's up to, I guess, the governor or the Board of Trustees to interpret how short that list must be.
Right.
But it's resulted in sole finalists, leaving people, as you mentioned, Mitch, in the dark about, who these applicants are and, how much input the community might be able to provide on who their next president is.
Again, if you're just tuning in right now, we're speaking with Jay Wagmeister. He covers education for the Florida Phoenix. It is 11:27. Mitch Perry with Ray Roa here. Last question for you, Jay, and that is 2 weeks ago, the state board adopted the Phoenix Declaration, a paragraphs-long statement pledging to parental involvement in education, patriotism in school, the nation's founding documents, limited government, and the equal dignity of all human beings. As you reported, and others did, this comes from the good folks at the Heritage Foundation, which, of course, are the intellectual authors of Project 2025, among other things. What is this Phoenix Declaration, and what's the thoughts from, what are Democrats saying about this?
So it was passed as a resolution, which, following the legislature, following law, it's a statement of belief. It's not necessarily carrying out a particular action other than just making clear what the board thinks. But House Democrats said that they do fear that it's a sign of bills and more tangible action to come. So in a media availability, Representative Robin Bartleman, a Democrat, she really focused on how the Heritage Foundation published Project 2025, which obviously was a major conversation during last year's presidential election. And she said the devil's in the details, and it might be a sign of things to come. And the stuff in the declaration, not all of it is entirely objectionable from Democrats, I don't believe, but as she said, the devil's in the details. And I think one of their other focuses is that, it was introduced at the Conservative Vision of Education Conference. And so although the commissioner said that how can this be partisan? This is something that we all agree on. Just the fact that it's coming from a partisan source, I think, has them worried. And the FEA, the Florida Education Association, also called it an effort to politicize the education system as well. So despite them saying that it might be a uniting statement, I'm not sure that Democrats or the union are feeling the same way.
All right. We'll leave it there. Jay Wagmeister coming to us the day after Thanksgiving up in Tallahassee with Florida Phoenix. Jay, thank you so much. Great to have you on the show.
Yeah, Jay, I just want to say thanks for all your hard work up there. It's cool to pick up your stories down here via the Phoenix. Always a great picture with the story. The stories just keep pouring in like they do from the rest of your colleagues. So thanks.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
All right. That again is Jay Wagmeister from the Florida Phoenix. And yeah, Ray, of course, at Creative Loafing, republishes a lot of our stories here. Myself and Jay and my other colleagues, Liv and Christine. So thank you for that, Ray.
Of course.
All right. So we're going to move on. It's just about exactly 11:30. And by the way, we're live right now. Yes, it's kind of the holiday weekend. A lot of people are taking it easy here, but we are here.
Sage is back there ready to pick up the phone calls. 813-239-9663. Go ahead and we'll get you
and Kim O'Connor, by the way, want to mention this, and thank you for this. Kim O'Connor writing and saying, please remember Bill Cotterill, the Tallahassee Democrat who passed away on Monday. Absolutely, Kim. Thank you for reminding me. Bill Cotterill. In fact, I tried to get Bill Cotterill on the show in the summertime. So Bill Cotterill, I believe, is 82 years old, passed away this past week. A longtime political reporter for different publications, the Tallahassee Democrat, most notably for many decades, I believe. And he was classic old school. And, I worked with some other folks, my time up there, the Phoenix off and on, with some senior reporters. But Bill Cotterill was the senior reporter, and he knew everything. And he was so balanced. He was really fair. And he'd been really prolific on Facebook, writing commentary. And sometimes he would ignore people of a certain ilk because he'd go after both liberals and conservatives. And anyway, but yes, rest in peace, Bill Cotterill. And we did. And I really feel bad, actually, Ray, because I did actually, a few months ago, I don't know, maybe it's like summer, June. It was sometime I was really kind of looking for some guests. And it would have been great to get him on this program.
Thinking about the press corps, Mitch, and a guy like Bill. But when you guys go up there, I mean, the work is pretty straight up, like you get there, you know what you got to do. A lot of the connections and relationships are the same. How much of what Bill did is kind of bygone in terms of the process, or is it still kind of the same?
Well, I think it is in some ways in terms of you just want to be most accurate, okay? People accuse the press of being biased or what have you. To me, most of the people I know, and certainly what I'm doing, you're just trying to get the facts straight, okay? That's the number one thing you want to do, and you want to be fair, and what that means is, obviously hearing from all sides. I'm working on a story right now, which is being critical of certain people. I got to reach out to those people who are being criticized in the piece. I mean, that's just like, 101, right? So I think the case of Bill Cotterill, the thing about longtime reporters in Tallahassee is that, and Gary Fineout, who with was the Politico, he's old school. He's been there for decades. The way that the legislature works in certain ways, and there's certain rules, and there's certain things that do that historical background really helps. It does, in my case, I've been here for now over like 25 years. I think Steve Newborn at WSF and myself, I think about this in Tampa. And I don't write for Tampa Publication, but, I'm here in Tampa. We're those same only reporters that have been here for that long. Others have gone to become editors, or they went to different cities, or they went to PR, or they retired, or something else happened here. So anyway.
Yeah, your lifestyle is quite enviable. Show up, file a story. It's awesome.
Yeah, I dig it. I dig it. Okay, so, hey, we've got a really exciting topic here. So, of course, we're talking about Thanksgiving. The official holiday season has begun here in America. And a lot of folks, what about access to quality food? And that is a 365-day issue in parts of South St. Petersburg, which is a food desert and has been since the Walmart at Tangerine Plaza closed back in 2017. But there have been some on the city council in St. Petersburg who've mentioned food co-ops as a way to try to maybe, fill that hole there. And in fact, there is what's known as the One Community Grocery Co-op that it's been in existence for several years, where their goal is to, quote, build a self-determined, community-owned, cooperative grocery store that meets the community's needs for fresh, healthy, and nutritionally dense foods and supports the physical, mental, and economic health of South St. Petersburg. And joining us right now via Zoom from One Community Grocery Co-op is its chair, Erica Hardison, and Kate Haynes, the communications director at One Community Grocery Co-op. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Hey, morning, Erica. Morning, Kay. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Skinny here. So, and as I told you guys straight up when I reached out to you a few days ago, I was not aware at all of One Community Grocery Co-op. So before we get into where you're at right now, tell us, how long you've been in existence. And I mentioned a little bit about the goal is, but tell us in your own words.
So One Community Grocery Co-op has been around since about 2018. And so we are a grassroots community-grown solution for food access and food sovereignty in St. Petersburg. And we've been building very steadily and surely to really provide an alternative solution that is controlled by the people and want to bring that to fruition.
Yeah, and so we're talking about people. You have members, right? How many folks have gotten involved with this?
So right now we're at 170 members.
And okay, so what came up? You were in the news just a few weeks ago, I believe it was, at the city council, where it was being discussed, and I think ultimately the council did not support providing you with a $50,000 capacity building grant. If you had received that funding, what would you have done with that?
So for that grant, we were looking for training and professional development, but also to help us with feasibility in what we call pre-development activities, which are like performers, market studies, and things like that. But I want to take it back a bit because I just heard you all talking about accurate information.
Yeah.
So what happened is we were invited back in August by the HERS committee, which is the Health, Energy, Resilience, and Sustainability Committee for the city. So it actually wasn't the whole council,
Okay,
this
sure.
a subcommittee
Committee, yeah.
of the council. And they are kind of tasked and charged, the council, St. Petersburg City Councils, as well as many other cities. Council members belong to different committees.
Right.
And through those committees, those things are risen or go up to council. And so in August, we did a presentation, and then this council meeting on the 13th, I believe, of November was one of the council members, Brandy Gabbard, wrote a resolution to get that funding. And so it's kind of and I'm sure you're aware of this as a political journalist, like your government class really comes into play here when you're talking about and understanding the situation. And so we went to the meeting because the resolution was on the agenda and to answer any questions. And from that, there were 4 council members on that committee, and 2 voted for, and 2 voted against.
That's right. It was Richie Floyd and Givens voted against, with Gabbard and Driscoll voting in favor, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, again, we're talking with Erica Hardison and Kate Haynes from One Community Grocery Co-op. And then I'd read, again, let's make sure this is accurate, I had read that you mentioned that you were there in August from the that committee there in the council, wanting to get some funding to attend a national conference on this. Now, you didn't get that funding, but you did attend this conference. And what was that about in terms of these other grocery co-ops in the country?
Right.
Yeah.
So it is the up-and-coming Startup Grocery Co-op Conference, and it's held every year. And we have been attending probably for about the past 6 or 7 years. And the conference is just a wealth of information and training and networking with other startup co-ops, and also with co-ops who have come through the kind of network and ecosystem and now are currently open and thriving. And so at that conference, we actually won a national award. We won the W.E.B. Du Bois Education and Training Award for co-ops in that space. And last year, we actually got nominated for 2 awards. So in terms of our participation and things like that, we're really on it on a national level, and locally we're really a community-led initiative and project, and so we are grassroots by most means of judgment, I would say.
Can I ask you guys, are you familiar? I saw this story come across recently that in Atlanta, they have a city-funded grocery store, or a couple stores, I believe now. Are you guys familiar with this at all?
Do you know the name of the grocery store?
Yeah, let's see. I think they're calling it Azalea Fresh Market at 25 Peachtree State Street. And I'm looking at a story from in Newsweek, and this is talking to the mayor, Dickens, and he was just reelected, I know, last month. I was in Atlanta on the day of the election. Andre Dickens, right? So he's talking about this. And he says, let's see here, let me roll down. He says, so they were trying to, in this, let's see, parts of Atlanta, he says, national grocery chains balked at filling the void in a certain part of town due to a lack of disposable income among would-be customers, coupled with the inclination to launch mega stores with massive parking lots. He says they were giving us their rationale, and I was like, so what's the solution? They didn't have one. I was just disappointed in that. So he says, Atlanta ultimately decided to, quote, do it ourselves by offering a slew of cash grants and loans totaling $8 million for 2 Azalea Fresh Market locations, the first of which opened on September 8th in the city's Olympia building and replaced a former Walgreens. And the second one is set to open in Southwest Atlanta in February. And he's partners with the Independent Grocers Alliance and another group there. So, yeah, I mean, that has happened. Of course, we hear a lot about in New York City about plans for government-run grocery stores there. But any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, we are not opposed to any grocery store solution, right? There's all kinds of solutions, and this one it's fairly new. I actually, this is my first time hearing about it, so I can't comment on this particular store. But what was presented in the committee meeting by the research that the city staffers have done is usually those grocery stores open for a little while and feel that need for a little while, but ultimately end up closing. And so the cooperative model is very different. It's built on a foundation of people. We always say in co-ops that we are an association of people first who have come together to solve a community challenge. And for one community grocery co-op, that community challenge is food access, health, and economic development. And so we look at it a little differently because we're an association of people, we have a built-in base, whereas other, like a city-owned store or other grocers, people are just shopping there. They have no initial ties to the grocery store. But for one community grocery co-op, as I said before, we are an association of people. So people have committed. At this point, we don't have a brick and mortar, so there are people who have committed before the grocery store opens, and there will be some who will join after. I mean, right now we have 170 members, but our hope is to have thousands of members. Many of the sibling co-ops in our ecosystem have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 members, and that is a good base of people who are going to support you every week, every month, versus a store that is trying to bring people in and trying to entice them with deals and things like that. Our member owners are committed beyond just the deal that they get in the grocery store.
Again, if you're just tuning in right now, it's 43 minutes past the hour. You're listening to The Skinny here on WMNF 88.5 FM. Mitch Perry with Ray Roa. We're speaking with Erica Hardison and Kay Haynes from the One Community Grocery Co-op. And you mentioned what, other organizations like this around the country have more members. So what's the state of co-ops around the country? I am from San Francisco, which I always remind people of. But I mean, but San Francisco, I know in the 90s when I was there, had one in South of Market area. I'm pretty sure that was the case. I don't know if it still exists. So what's this? Do you know how you went to this conference? Big, how expansive this is around the country? How many we have roughly?
Well, there are probably thousands of co-ops around and grocery co-ops around the country.
Okay.
Specifically in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, I should say, there are several. There's actually one that is in our ecosystem, Mandela Market, which serves kind of the same demographic as we seek to serve in South St. Pete. It's in Oakland, and they are actually, I believe, a worker owner cooperative. And so it's very similar, but each co-op is really, really focused on the community need in their geographical area. And so if we look to the Northeast in New York, there's in Brooklyn, there's a very famous co-op, Park Slope Co-op, and they've been open for over 50 years, have tens of thousands of members, and are operating successfully and have been. And in fact, there was an article where, they had the cheapest price of eggs in Brooklyn. And then when we look to kind of newer co-ops in Detroit, Michigan, about a year and a half ago, Detroit People's Food Co-op opened, and they have about 4,000 members, do about $84,000 a week in business, and employ around 20 some odd community members. So when we say at One Community Co-op, we're more than a grocery store, we're definitely that. We're providing more than just groceries. Co-ops provide education. We stand on 7 cooperative principles, and those guide our operations and how we do business and how we interact with the communities that we're in. There are, going back to where in the country, like in California and in the Midwest, co-ops are definitely more popular than they have been in the South. But that is just come through what we call the waves of co-ops, because in earlier times, there were many, many co-ops, and we are a Black-led organization, so there were many Black-led co-ops during times of segregation and times when people couldn't participate in the overall economy due to the laws of the nation. So when we look at that, there's a Southern, and I'm drawing a blank here, sorry, but there are several co-ops that have been in existence for different reasons, and they have found ways for people to thrive while still not being able to participate for some reason or another in the regular economy.
Sure. I guess the last question I'll have for you is if people, hearing about this for the first time, if they wanted to learn more information or maybe get involved with this, how can they do that?
So for us, the best way to get information is to go to our website, www.ocgc.coop, and that's COOP. It looks like coop, but it's actually co-op. And we hold information sessions. So we actually have one on Sunday from 7 to 8. And if you go on our website, you can find that information and find out how you can sign up and listen. We also are very much so in this stage of the game out in the community. And so we do a lot of pop-ups. In fact, tomorrow we'll be at Books and Breakfast in Childs Park at the Childs Park Recreation Center from 11 to 1. And again, like I said, we're more than a co-op, and one of our principles is democratic control. And so we'll be at the Barack Obama Library in St. Petersburg doing a meetup with the Women League of Voters. They're doing a presentation on voting rights and legislation.
Oh, when's that happening? Yeah.
That's happening tomorrow from 2 to 3 p.m.
Okay.
And so, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Ray, you wanted to say something?
No, I was wondering, you talk about expanding the membership. You want to get to thousands. You're at about a 170 right now. The St. Pete Catalyst, Mark Parker there reported that you wanted to get to 300 before opening a physical location. What is your elevator pitch to people like when they ask, where do you get the product? Am I going to be able to choose like I do at the grocery store? Obviously not. And what do you find as far as people who really have been in the co-op for a long time? What do they enjoy about it? And how are you able to, more or less sell people on it and keep them in there?
So I'll kind of answer your questions backwards.
Sure.
So for, people who have been in it a long time, like I said, we're an association of people first with a mission. So many of the people who are members now in this first stage are people who just believe in the mission and believe that every food is a human right and that everybody should have access to fresh, affordable, nutritionally dense food that, heals and helps their bodies instead of hinders it. And so those are our early adopters who are joining and are members before the store opens. When people say, well, you don't have a store, so what's the point of joining now, right? Because if you join now, like I was saying before, we operate off of seven cooperative principles, and the second being democratic control. So if you join now, you have the opportunity to really shape the co-op, to help us decide what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like in the inside, what products we will definitely carry. Like some co-ops are all organic, right? And their produce. I'm not saying that's what we are going to be, but member owners get to make some of those decisions. And right now, member owners really get to shape what the co-op is about and what it looks like and how we work with the community and for the community to really bring this vision to fruition.
All right. We're going to leave it there. Erica Hardison, the board president of the One Community Grocery Co-op, and Kate Haynes, the communication director at One Community Grocery Co-op. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Skinny this morning.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Take care. All the best to you. All right, Ray, we've got a few more minutes before we're out of here. 11:51. I'm going to open again. Tell our listeners if anybody wants to chime in and talk about anything they've heard in the hour here. 813-239-9663. We do got a text message here from somebody here. I don't want to see their name, and they said they would like to thank our guests we just listened to here for lifting up the community-owned, community-run grocery store model by getting the profit out. Co-ops build strong communities. Yeah, that's exactly what they're talking about here.
Yeah, it's interesting to be talking about this the day after Thanksgiving, this day of abundance for so many people, and we didn't really get to dive into it with the co-op folks. But sometimes when you look at that map of that part of St. Pete, it is wild to see the lack of grocery stores down there.
The desert. I mean, it's a definition of a food desert.
Carla Bristol, director of the St. Pete Youth Farm, who joined us, I forget when it was. I think it was over the summer. She bristled at us calling it a food desert.
She didn't like that term.
She didn't like that term. Maybe it was a little bit a negative, but the fact of the matter is that there isn't a lot of grocery stores.
Well, I know Michelle Rayner, she's got a bill filed one again for this session. I think it literally mentions food desert, but the point being to do something like this, I should look that up, what that bill is.
We got some phone calls here, actually, if we're going to get some on the air here.
So let's get a few folks in here before we're out of here. Again, it's 11:53. We've got about 7-8 minutes here to go here on this day after Thanksgiving. Let's see. We've got Lenny from Gulfport. Lenny, you're on WMNF.
Hi, thank you very much. A couple of questions. Can your guest please repeat those two events that she mentioned? They're going to happen tomorrow.
One's at the Barack Obama Library. They're off the phone now. So one of them is at the Barack Obama Library tomorrow. And
so that was at 2 p.m. I remember that.
That's correct. And then their Facebook group is One Community Grocery Co-op. That's 4 words. Pretty long, but I found it pretty quickly. And then the website, I believe, is ocgc.coop, COOP, and they have all that stuff linked there on their social media.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny.
Thanks,
Appreciate it. Okay, let's go to John Howell calling in here. Hello, John.
Hey, Johnny in Brooklyn, Park Slope, Brooklyn, and a long-time Park Slope Food Co-op member.
Nice.
And our co-op is we're for members. I guess can't really shop there, but you have to work there.
Right.
It's a worker only, and everybody has their shifts, and we still have thousands and thousands of people in waiting list. It's great. It's you have to. I worked on the construction committee. I installed all the.
Oh, really?
All the through the various since the 80s different technologies to support co-op operations. So thick Ethernet, thin Ethernet, AppleNet, Ethernet, and all the different, for the checkouts and the registries and everything we did. So seeing that grow, and it's really only shut down one day a year. I enjoy WMNF, and I'm in the circle of resistance, and when I'm in that area.
Yeah, stay with us, John. I think we have some questions.
Well, yeah. So John, how long you been involved with that co-op up there for? For decades?
87.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah, I think it opened in 73. It's this amazing building. It's big. It's huge.
Yeah, I'm on the construction. I'm an architect. I was on the construction committee. We went from one building. We bought the building next door, and then we expanded to twice the size. And so it's all about refrigeration and keeping things. I was wondering about in South St. Petersburg if the location of the one community, if they would be subject to flooding, would be my question.
Yeah, and I think the FEMA standards for construction would probably take care of all that. You see all the new construction now, everything is with climate change in mind. You know, it's so cool to think about the Park Slope Food Co-op. It's cool that you're on the phone here, John. The co-op, in so many ways, food is almost like this auxiliary thing to this community that you have going on. I know NPR recently picked up, how the war on Gaza was also dividing the Park Slope, contingent. What is it like to be part of such a niche and specific community that's a tiny segment of your own whole big life there? What does it mean to you to be a part of that?
Well, my wife is a member too.
Okay.
She was a newsletter editor.
Okay.
And the BDS, the Boycott, Sanction, Divest,
Sure.
been going on a long time, and those were, the most heated letters would come in. I think we're glad to be sort of beyond that, and then we can do our own. We only had a couple Israeli products anyway, but we also carried West Bank products. What I wanted to mention, being a New Yorker and with our new mayor coming in, Fiorello LaGuardia was the one that really championed city markets.
That's right.
And they're all over the place. In various states, and some of them upgraded, and some are still city markets. And I think it's a great idea. And our green markets have gone, the city-sponsored, are just terrific. Again, in Park Slope, the Grand Army one on Saturdays is absolutely fantastic, just like Union Square.
And the shifts, they're still just 2 hours and 45 minutes every 6 weeks?
I couldn't tell you. I'm retired.
Oh, okay. Oh, you get to retire for the go-to.
So if you work long enough and you're old enough, you can... Now we live a little bit, we're on the other side of Prospect Park, so we're a little kind of too far to go regularly. City Bike will get me there.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Well, thanks for the call, and thanks for
John,
listening.
Thanks for listening, and thanks for calling in. Really appreciate that. We also
I'm still waiting on my Circle of Resistance T-shirt.
spot.
So,
man. Okay, we're going to have to check that out, but this might be a bad week to check on that.
Yeah,
we're the only people in the building today.
But John, yeah. All right, thanks so much. And we also got somebody called in or texted in, I should say, or emailed in, said, I'm a member owner ready for a store. And then, okay, we also want one more caller here. We've got Josh. I think he wants to talk about universities. Josh from Clearwater. Hi.
Yeah, I heard the first half of your show.
Yeah.
Good show today. I was just curious if, all these presidents of the universities, I was wondering if you guys know if something like that stuff's happening in other states. I'll hang up and I'll listen, but I was just curious where they
Thanks, Josh.
Or is this happening all over the country? Thank you.
Thank you. And be completely honest, I don't know. I just cover Florida, and it's a lot here. But, Ron DeSantis has done things in his own unique way in terms of the power that aren't really being done in a lot of states. I said this to somebody yesterday, like California, where I'm from, used to be considered the ideas, progressive ideas would stem from California and then wave across the country. In Florida, I feel it's the opposite way, where under Ron DeSantis, and if you're a conservative, you'll love this, I guess. He has done all these things. This is
like the lab for these conservative ideas. Are they going to
spread out in other parts of the country? They won't go to all 50 states because, there's 20-something blue states that aren't going to adopt anything that Florida does. But there are other states in the Southeast and throughout that will copy what the state has done. And Ron DeSantis has been very proactive, very aggressive on some of these things, and just Trump is doing that at a certain level on the federal level where you got all you have is lawsuits to try to stop some of that stuff. But I don't know, to answer your question though about the state universities, that is something that is unique. And again, a lot of Republican lawmakers who are now presidents of the universities. We had John Thrasher recently at Florida State. I think he had a respected tenure there. He just passed away recently. But some of these other folks weren't really known for like a big education background, so I think it's a little more questionable.
It should be noted, I know we're running out of time, but USF has really been able to stay out of the fray and the politics of it with its current
new guy, he is really respected. I think across the board anyway, and that's a good thing.
I wonder if that's a good model, going forward. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Mitch, I had a great time talking to you today for the hour. I'm so glad that we both had a chance to come in. Skip Sassy is on the boards for us here today at WMNF Sage. Thank you so so much for handling the phones. Real life people here at WMNF Tampa, thank you so much for supporting this community radio station. We'll be back next week, and then we'll definitely talk about more news, right? Back in the grind.
Yes.
As we close out the year. And then we're going to miss Mitch because he's going up to Tallahassee.
That's not till January.
But not until January. So we'll see you in 7 days. Thank you so much for listening to WMNF Tampa. Art in Your Ear is next. Joellen Shilke, the hostess who loves you the most, is here. All right. See you later.